Does a housing question still exist in Italy? In the last 7 years, the production of dwellings has increased constantly. The economic boom of the 60s seems so far away, when workers were drawn to big cities from the countryside. By now, the demonstrations of students and workers shouting their right to housing sound anachronistic. Why then, together with the number of new houses being built, has the number of evictions for unpaid rent increased so dramatically in the last few years? It seems paradoxical. The housing question no longer concerns those who cannot find a house, but those who cannot afford the one in which they had been living. In Italy, there are 3,200,000 families living in a home rented under a private contract. For 1 in 6 of these families, the rent has increased beyond 1/3 of their overall income. The average rent has doubled since 2000, reducing a family's available income. Today, the poverty line is moving upwards, overwhelming the middle class and downgrading many who thought that they were out of danger. In April 1969, Fiat announced that it was hiring 15,000 new workers. Just a year earlier, it had already hired 18,000. In need of manpower, the industry asked the government to provide housing for workers, mostly coming from southern Italy. As a result of the 1971 law, in Italy, approximately 900,000 families currently live in a public housing apartment building. In Rome alone, 452,436 rooms were built for a population equivalent to that of all of Umbria. With the expiry of the housing plan in 1988 and throughout the 90s, the housing issue appears to vanish and is no longer felt as a political and cultural concern. Public housing is seen only as the generator of urban ghettos and areas of social decay. However, during these years, housing resurfaces as a social emergency, and vacant buildings are squatted in once again. Today, the majority of families own the house they live in, and the rental market is considered marginal. However, this is a recent trend. In the 70s, the proportion was completely inverted. Less rent, more ownership. The very modest quantity of social rent in our country can help in explaining this phenomenon. A rigid rental market that only offers availability in the private sector causes an increase in rental prices, resulting in a growing tendency towards the purchase of houses. Another element that favors ownership is the easy access to mortgages. Families become heavily indebted for higher sums and for longer periods, especially in major cities. Not only does the building boom not solve the problem of housing, it is partially responsible for it. There are several causes, but one has to deal with the radical mutation induced by securitization during the last decade. Real estate trading makes its appearance. A house is bought and sold several times in a short period of time. Houses are turned into paper, like shares in the financial market. According to The Economist, in Western countries, the total value of residential buildings has increased from $30 to $70 trillion in less than 10 years. But who fed the real estate market and its boundless growth? In the 3 years between 2004 and 2006, the family's debts increased by 30%. In the meantime, public housing disappears. Just 1,990 dwellings were built in 2006, compared to 22,000 in 1998. Italy invests 0.1% of its GNP in housing. The average is 0.72% for the European Union countries. The move towards securitization widens market polarization. At one end, there is public housing that responds to the needs of the society's weakest members. At the other end, there's private housing available on the free market. Between these two extremes, there is room for the affordable house, the answer for those who are too rich to be eligible for public housing, but not enough to buy houses for sale at market prices. The affordable house means rethinking the production of dwellings and the use of public funding. Confronting the new housing question does not mean spending more public money, but applying more intelligent strategies for the use of resources. The object is to increase the number of houses available for rent with a partial subsidy to match the European standard. These are possible strategies, from developers to ethical funds. Mobilize non-speculative resources by involving private investors, like real estate ethical funds. Open to new owners. Provide incentives for housing associations and forms of not-for-profit private property management. From infinite expansion to the city as a finite resource, use wasted interstitial and residual spaces left over from zoning in what could be called the city's inner edge. Take advantage of the public city. Use spaces that are up for development through the liquidation of public estates as planned in the 2007 budget law. Demolition reconstruction. In Italy, building regulations make it difficult to demolish, and in the rare cases when it is done, often it is not to rebuild. On the contrary, there are many interesting examples in Europe in which neighborhoods have been demolished and rebuilt.